I just make a few initial remarks. What is being done is technically very simple. The legislation takes pseudoephedrine out of one section of the Misuse of Drugs Act, which classifies it as a Class B2 drug, puts it into another section which classes it as a Class C2 drug. That means that you can have it, you can bring up to a month's supply through the border, but it remains restricted. So, for example, if you wanted to import a tonne, then the police would have, and customs would have something to say about that. The second part, which is in parallel to the legislation you're considering, is that Cabinet has agreed regulations which are currently waiting for the 28 days until they come into force. And those regulations, when they come into force, will effectively take the pseudoephedrine products and specific pseudoephedrine products, both in tablet and liquid form, from being a prescription only medicine to a restricted medicine. There are basically three types of medicines. Restricted, you require a prescription, and that's been the case with pseudoephedrine since 2011. Pharmacy only, you must have from a pharmacy, but anyone can sell it. This will now be a medicine that you can purchase, but only from a pharmacist rather than perhaps a shop assistant who works in the pharmacy. So what we're doing takes pseudoephedrine to be something that, but for the fact that you don't need a doctor's prescription anymore, it will be fairly tightly restricted in terms of who can sell it, who can import it, and how you can get it. And the logic there is that while it does have the potential to be misused, that is only likely to happen if people could get large amounts of it at low prices. The advice that we've received, and I think the committee's had from the Ministry of Health, is that realistically, sadly as it may be, the pea trade has become far more industrialised and efficient, and therefore it's extremely unlikely anyone would find it economically viable to use pseudoephedrine taken from a pharmacy to manufacture pea in the way that it was prior to 2011, and which led to the ban and so on. So I think that at a technical level and a policy level is probably about all I can really say. But of course, happy to take questions about any further details.
Excellent. Thank you, Minister. Scott Milne is the Executive Director of the Consumer Healthcare Products Association of New Zealand Incorporated, and will join us on Zoom. Scott, yes, we have you. I'm Sam Uffendale, the Chair of the Health Committee. Thank you very much for your submission, which we have read through, and for joining us today. Over to you.
Look, thank you, Chair. I'm just trying to turn my camera. Do you have a video as well?
You're up, yep.
First of all, committee, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate this opportunity, particularly given the time frames. My submission is short. I'll take you briefly through the headlines. CHPNZ, Consumer Healthcare Products Association of New Zealand, supports the action. Pseudoephedrine is an appropriate treatment for the decongestion of the upper respiratory tract, and is particularly effective for the treatment of colds and winter ills and chills of that nature. It is widely used around the world and is regarded as effective and safe as any medicine. We accept, as I'm sure everybody does, that all medicines come with risk, but pseudoephedrine would be, from a clinical perspective, be regarded as a low-risk medicine. We accept the concept that the reintroduction of pseudoephedrine would be in pack sizes not dissimilar to when it was available in New Zealand earlier this century, and that the total amount of active ingredient per packet would be limited. It is more effective, as numerous double-blind studies have proved than anything that we have on the market at the moment. Most decongestion would be carried out by phenylephrine, an older derivative, or similar molecule, but not as effective, but also different in that phenylephrine can't be converted into methamphetamine. We understand why pseudoephedrine was restricted in the first place, and do not disagree with those premises. However, the market and the world has changed since that time, and we believe that the reasons for excluding it in the first place no longer exist. Well, I represent an organisation whose members agree with the reintroduction and who are able to supply. They can supply this winter if an Australian product is acceptable. And I guess one of the things that we would have to ask ourselves, if it is not acceptable, why isn't it acceptable, and why does New Zealand have to be different? Harmonisation is part of the thrust going forward of this government's ability to have better medicines available to it in a more timely manner. I've made some comments in there about safety, and particularly I note the comments of the previous speaker that there will be some pharmacists who are concerned, and this is an area that will have to be watched, but there are many medicines in a pharmacy that are desirable from an abuse point of view. And we would never condone that a pharmacist be forced to stock the product. We are concerned, however, about MedSafe's ability to process this work, and I would ask that the Ministry of Health acknowledge that extra resource is needed for the regulator as policy changes are enacted. We have gone through a period of extremely extended timeframes, particularly over the pandemic period, and MedSafe, I'm pleased to say, have been amazing in catching up on that backlog and getting ahead of the game. But as an industry association, we are concerned that pressures like this could take us back to the bad old days with extended timeframes for regulatory processes. And finally, we will be working with other professional bodies, the Pharmaceutical Society, the Pharmacy Guild, and all major retailers to ensure that we do all we can to make this reintroduction as seamless and as sensible as possible.
We appreciate you taking the time to join us today.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the time.
Gary Charles. Welcome, Gary. Good to have you here.
All right. Afternoon. Kia ora.
Got it.
My name is Gary Charles. I'm a long-term drug law reform activist and the gallery stalker. If you haven't seen me in the gallery, it's probably because I'm sitting above you. Right. My position is that I support the end of punitive prohibition of substances. I do not support amendments to the Misuse of Drugs Act which continue to allow the Misuse of Drugs Act to be in place. What we're here today is to discuss symptoms of problems that have been caused by the Misuse of Drugs Act, and we're not actually addressing the problem of the Misuse of Drugs Act causing all these problems. I've just listened to the Minister make all these arguments that actually are about getting rid of the Misuse of Drugs Act. Now, this isn't just crazy man in a suit talking. In 2011, the Law Commission recommended, its primary recommendation was the repeal and replacement of the Misuse of Drugs Act. And what I've seen is that amendments to the Misuse of Drugs Act bring about other negative consequences because we're not actually solving the problem, we're just putting more problems in place. Perfect example is medicinal cannabis users are still being arrested and processed through the justice system. The justice system doesn't seem to know what the Ministry of Health regulations are, because the stigma from the Misuse of Drugs Act means that the Ministry of Health is too frightened to tell people what the regulations are when they change them, because they don't want to be seen to be encouraging consumption. The other thing with amendments is that, yes, they are actually just extending the life of this act and bringing on more problems, but it's also creating these barriers, as we've heard, to legitimate medicines for people that need them. The barriers are not just for people suffering from colds. Everybody that's seeking mental health care is being criminalised for self-medicating with prohibited substances because they can't get any treatment when they ask for it. This is another consequence of the Misuse of Drugs Act. We're criminalising people when they're in need of some sort of assistance, locking them up. It is not the help that they need. So I'm 100% convinced by all the evidence I've seen in my time as an adult, since 1975 when this law was passed, that this law is the root cause of all these problems and the reason we're here today. And I strongly recommend that this committee recommends to the government that they repeal or replace the Misuse of Drugs Act as per the recommendations of the 2011 Law Commission report.
Thank you, Gary. Thank you for your submission. Thanks for being here in person and for your continued following in the gallery. Do any members have questions? We have about 1 or 2 minutes.
I mean, so you're saying that it's not going far enough? You know, we're here talking about the pseudoephedrine.
We're talking about
what is your opinion on that specifically?
with pseudoephedrine, I think that people that require it for a medical condition should have access to it, and that access should be regulated and controlled. The whole thing of the pseudoephedrine ban was that at the time, everyone on my side of the argument was saying, this is not going to work. Nobody listened to us, and we have our whole I told you so moment now, but we're sick of our I told you so moment. Why can't the evidence and the facts be the dominating factors in the consideration of these situations? Why do we have to pretend amending this law is going to fix it? Because it's never going to be fixed. It has been a problem right from the start.
Thank you. James Megger.
Yeah, thank you, Gary. I just had a question about your comment around your opposition to the bill is that it doesn't go far enough and therefore shouldn't be passed. Do you have any concerns that that kind of approach to legislative reform, especially in the misuse of drug space, might lead people to just oppose reform, albeit gradual, in the hopes of getting some sort of comprehensive reform? Do you see any risks with taking that approach?
The only risks I think that there might be is that people would actually have to pay attention properly to this and actually see that the evidence is all in favour of repealing and replacing. You know, this Parliament went through a huge process to get to the recommendation from the Law Commission, and it's been ignored ever since. And I'm getting old waiting for something to happen.
One more quick sup for James.
Very quickly, but just substantively, do you agree with the concept of shifting the classification of pseudoephedrine?
I agree with all prohibited substances being removed from prohibition for safe, regulated control.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Thanks for your time. Thanks for coming in.